use of affinity map, it helps us to have the collaboration when we analyze the findings together. So this way we can see the patterns of the problems that our users are having, and then discuss later how can we make improvements out of them. And the other thing would be, the later stage would be showing a process through design sprint. So we conduct a design sprint not just because it's something cool, something that is like everyone is doing, but because we need to show to the other team members how research could be integrated into a process. So in this way, you will see how before we try to understand the problem by doing research in advance, and then afterwards you create a solution based on the research, and then you create prototype that in the end is going to be tested again with the user. So you will see that there's an iteration happening in this process. It was an eye-opening for our team members that they see this as a good way to collaborate. And scaling part, now we are in this stage that we start to hire more and more resources. We hire more UI UX designers to be embedded to each teams. And we also use the UX tool. It helps us to make people feel that research is something that you can do also quick, easy and often, because we felt that research is seen more as a bottleneck. People think that, oh, research is so much work to do, user lab has so much preparation, and then this UX tool helps us a lot to conduct tests early, as quick and as often. Okay, so now we are in the later stage. I will give the stage to Carolina and Pietro about fast forward scaling research.
Hello. So thanks, Luky, for showing us how everything started in FlixBus, and also how do we convince people the importance of UX. And I hope to tell you a little bit how we are doing from that. After convincing people that UX is important, how are we setting up our team to make sure that we receive all requests and we do research the better way here. So how do we accelerate it? Oops. So the first thing is the demand for user research skyrocketed. So we started doing with a few teams. In 2017, we tested web application and mobile application. The teams started to talk. So they say, okay, research is cool, it's interesting, it's not so expensive, we can do it internally. So they started to make talk about it, and we started to receive more requests. So last year we did different researchers for customer service, internal too, even for travel experience. So we are talking about offline research, we are talking about the real bus. And we are happy to do now some research even for areas that are outside Flix Tech, so marketing and branding. We are also helping them understand how campaign messages impact the users, and what do the users think about the brand recall, also together with usability tests. So, as Luky said, we received a lot of requests, so how are we going to organize to make the research early, often, and quickly as possible? And we decided for a remote testing tool. We actually tested some tools last year to see which one would fit better with our needs. And we decided for a remote testing tool because it will help us act in different markets. So we are just 4 now, so the company is growing a lot, going to very different countries. We don't have this budget or time or people to travel all around. So we need to understand what are the cultural differences. It's not the same thing to launch a project in US or Italy, for example. So this tool really helps us to talk to these people. It's also nice to have them answering research for their own environment. So we test, for example, prototypes. They can use it at their homes and via cell phone or via desktop, and we already have the research answers very quickly. And also, we are not known as the bottleneck, so people don't think that it will take so much time to do the research, so it helps us receive more requests. This is the face of our remote testing tool, and we just wanted to show you, for example, that we can use different methods separately, and also we have the opportunity to mix them, which is very interesting. I remember a research we did with app icon for the branding team, for example, and we were able to use survey and click test together. So it really helped us have different points of view when we need to understand the user. And democratizing UX, it's not about just tools, but it's also about people, especially about people, because we need people to buy in, we need people to collaborate, and that's why we thought we are only 4 people. It's a very big company. How can we impact every time more areas and more people? So we kind of started thinking that maybe when we are maturing ourselves, we are also using like or getting a different role here. We are more thinking of us as facilitators now. So we cannot do research for everyone, but we can teach them and we can help them phrase questions. We can help them understand how to use a remote tool. So they can also do research for their teams. A designer can also do research, a PO can do a research. And we can facilitate this via the process or sitting with them and discussing maybe the questions. So this is what we are talking about. When you talk about people, as Luky showed at the awareness moment, it was just her, so big job here to convince people and to explain why UX is important. And thanks to her and to her initiative, it was possible to adopt UX research in the company and to structure a new team. So this is when we started, not so long ago. So we are now 4 people in the team. And we also had this remote testing tool as a partner. So what we feel is that we can do some research and help and have their help to sometimes analyze or discuss a new method. And this is why we think people is very important at this moment. It's also a little bit of what we are doing here. I feel like sharing and discussing and understanding what are other people doing, so we can also learn with this. And at the maturing process, we see ourselves, as I told you, as more as a facilitators, and then everyone needs to be involved. So POs, designers, developers, stakeholders, this is our kind of our own initiative right now. How can we make our team grow by convincing other people that UX is important and they need to be part of this movement? This is one example. It happened like 1 week ago, and we had a workshop with POs. I also see a PO here, someone who was there. And it was a nice moment because it took us just like 2 hours. We actually used one meeting they were already having to talk a little bit of how do you phrase questions. So we understand that all the areas have problems or issues they want to solve, and how can we help them understand how to phrase questions. And sometimes just simple things like do's and don'ts, how not to be biased, how to make open questions. And then it was very convenient for us because after phrasing questions with their own issues that they wanted to test, we went here to Alexanderplatz. There's a bus stop for FlixBus there, and we actually interviewed, the POs interviewed the users. So it was super interesting to see the product owners as a researcher for one day. It was a little bit of them feeling how we feel, so they understood, I think, that it's not always so easy to make questions, not always so easy to make people answer these questions, and it was super interesting to see them participating and being part of this UX initiative. Alex, did you like it? Do you have any any input? Okay. Thank you. We can talk later. And we also divide ourselves so we can focus and understand a little bit more about the areas of the company. So we try to attend different teams and different requests. And we also try to sit with the product owners and the areas to understand their strategies. So then we can actually prioritize which research are we doing before, which research we need more time to do, and it helps us understand a little bit more about the strategy and be more connected to the teams. And also, as Luky mentioned, sharing the findings is super important to us. So as more as we speak about UX, more we can see people talking about it. And when we share the findings in the Slack or Confluence, we see people discussing and asking questions. And sometimes these questions even lead to another study. So it really helps to share the findings and make people talk about it. And when and how to do research, this is something that we talk a lot here. And what we feel is that in the beginning, it's the same with people. We have few people, so we have few and simple methods. When we grow, we can also start doing more methods. We can do design sprints and focus group because we have more people and more knowledge and more time. And one example is that in maturing process, we want to do more field studies, which is something that we really think can drive innovation, because we are out there, we are in the stations, in the bus, in the real world, and we can see things that sometimes when you are inside the office, you don't have these eyes, these visions. And when you go to take a bus together with the users, sometimes you see some details, some things that we are not seeing here. So we really believe this specific method can also be a maturing method. And I'll just go through the methods very quickly that we use here. I'm sure you guys are familiar and use these methods too. Just sharing how we use them. So when you need to test a prototype, a website, or an app, we go for usability tests, so think out loud interviews. We recruit these people, externals, and we talk to them like deep interviews for 45 minutes, 1 hour, to understand when we have a prototype to test. We can also do some focus groups and moderated talks. When we have some idea that is not defined yet, we ask for these talks so we can really discuss it and collect different opinions. The guerrilla test is the one I was talking about. We just go to the stations and go to the buses, and there is a surprise effect because people are not recruited. We just ask for their help, and they can quickly validate a user behavior or something that we had already developed, and we want just to make sure that people are understanding it. We just go to a station and really show it to real people. It's like a simple, but it's super useful for us. Design sprint, I think Luky talked about it. It really helps when you need to collaborative work. So we need to show people how we do research, and we need their buy-in. So putting everybody together for 5 days is something very intense, but it really helps people get together and get to a consensus and came up with a tested solution after 5 days. So it's a very intense but very strong method that we use here. And this is like one of the latest method that we've been using. We called it UX croissant because we usually do this in the morning, and we invite people to come here, or we test with our new employees of the month. We put them together, and it works like a user lab, but we just test quick findings. So if we have like 15 minutes with each one of them, they do a rotation and they answer all the moderators' questions. So it's like a quick method. We can do it with employees, and it's fun and simple, and it really helps for quick findings. And this is my last slide, but I really think it's a nice thing to share with you, because this is how we've been organizing the researches the requests that we receive. Actually, when we think about a product development timeline, there's always the strategy, the execution, and the evaluate part. And what we feel is that in the beginning, when the team was less experienced, or when people didn't know about UX, we were testing especially evaluation projects. So the product was already defined. The owners, they just needed to see, okay, can people use this product? So we used to receive more projects at this stage. As soon as the things evolve and you are getting more mature, we expect to receive more projects in the execution part. So we can really execute together with the team. We can decide together which way to go. How can we guide ourselves? And in the best case, when we are very mature, we actually get in with research in the strategy moment. And this is for us the most interesting. That's why we wrote here, test the problem and not the solution, because it can really save money to have research before. When we start here, we can really define together with the team what's the best strategy to go. So just some examples of questions. When we are in the strategy moment, we can ask, for example, what do people want? What do people need? Who are the users? Who do we want to talk to? So it's really about strategy. When we go to execution, it's more like, how do people find stuff? And evaluation would be like, which design is better? So you already have the two designs. You just need to decide which one to go. So I think this is something interesting to have in mind, that as soon as we get more mature with research, the more to the strategy part we go. And this is something that really helps us make decisions here, prioritize our research, because, of course, it really makes sense for us and for the company strategy as user-centric to start research every time earlier and together with the strategy. So now Pietro will present you the cases, and he will explain which moment of the timeline is each case.
Okay, so let's see some use cases now. Just looking back at this timeline, we're going to start from the right and go towards the left. So we picked three example studies that we conducted. The first one would be the self-check-in machine. Again, this is in the evaluation stage because we already had a solution that we wanted to test at this stage, and this is what we were mostly doing in the beginning, only receiving solutions that the other teams wanted us to evaluate. Then moving to the second study is called Tip the Driver. This was already in the execution stage, so we wanted to find out what this solution would look like before it started to be developed. And then now we are trying to get more into the strategized part, and we have a use case called mobile web redesign. So we wanted to really redesign this from scratch. Okay, let's start with the self-check-in machine. Oops. So this is the self-check-in machine, and the whole idea regarding this project was to reduce chaos at boarding. So the current situation when people board into our bus is that it can get pretty chaotic when they need to check in because the driver has a lot of workload to do. So right now the driver has to welcome the customers, to take care of the luggage, and also to check their tickets. So we got this idea from our travel experience team in Munich to install these self-check-in machines, and they conducted these manufacturers to have them prepared, and then they came to us to test them before installing them on the buses, so before the pilot. And we wanted to know not just in terms of usability, so not just the interface itself, but also whether this would actually help to reduce the workload for the drivers, so whether people would still rely on the driver instead of using the machine. How did we do this? We created what I like to call an experience prototype. I don't know if you recognize this room. Is this here? Area 51, we made a fake bus out of these benches that you're sitting on and beer crates. And then we gave our participants some passports, some tickets, and some luggage. And we also had an intern acting as a driver. So we invited people to essentially pretend that they were boarding on a real bus here in Area 51. And then after they were sitting on the bus, we gave them an individual questionnaire to fill out. And then we split them in 2 groups and conducted a focus group to get more qualitative feedback. So what did we find out? Well, first of all, I can show you how people were supposed to use the machine on the left. So how they were supposed to scan their ticket on the top. And on the right is how they actually did it. So not a lot of people got it right. Also, some feedback from one of our participants was 65 years old. I think the machine doesn't like me. So, I mean, it was really useful for us to see this already before piloting on the buses, because we know that there's going to be a learnability factor. So we improved the UI, first of all, to try and guide people towards scanning the ticket on the top and not on the front where the instructions are. And also, we expect people to struggle a lot in the beginning, and for this, we are going to launch this while having a shop assistant present to help both the bus driver and the customers until they learn how to use the machine once we roll it out. Yeah, and I think in general, this would help save a lot of money and a lot of effort that we could already test this before going live. Moving on to the next study. As I mentioned, this is called Tip the Driver. It's a feature that is not launched yet, but this would allow our customers to leave a tip to the bus driver. And the whole idea behind this is that if our customers tip our driver, then our drivers will be nicer to our customers. So it's a win-win situation. Everyone is happy. And we got this at execution state because we already had this, we already knew that we wanted to launch this feature, but we didn't know how, like where should we launch it, what should it look like, or how should it function. And yeah, so we started with, we had some research going on from our market research department regarding different countries that we could roll this feature to. So we looked at, first of all, how large is our customer base in there? How is the mobile app usage, because this is a feature that would be launched on mobile apps, but also on cultural factors. For example, we know that in the US and in Germany, for example, the tipping culture is completely different from Italy or France, where it's just not as common to leave a tip, especially for bus drivers. So from this initial market research, we moved to qualitative research, and our team conducted quite a few different types of study for this one. We started with guerrilla testing. Again, here at the bus station in Alexanderplatz, we went there and we started approaching people who were waiting for the bus or had just dropped off a bus. We managed to talk to some Italian people, to French people. They confirmed they don't like tipping. But then we also talked to someone from Saudi Arabia or from the US, and they were really enthusiastic and really welcoming of this feature. So based on this, we could already decide to focus more on the US market and on the German market. And we conducted more remote, unmoderated studies and also user labs, so here in the office. And for this one, we didn't want to just focus on the customers, but also on the drivers, because the drivers would be the second target users of this feature. So what did we find out from all of these studies? Well, we really wanted to support all the different POs, because there were a lot of different teams involved in this, in their decision making, so to collect requirements for them and to help them come up with a solution. And in the beginning, we had a really low fidelity prototype that we were showing to the people at the station. And then we iterated on that to improve the design. For example, we realized that it would make sense to combine this feature, so with a feature called Rate Your Ride, so that people can leave feedback on their journey, and then at the same time, if they want, they can leave a tip to the driver. We also increased the number of emojis from 4 to 5 in order to leave feedback, because people want to be hungry, sorry. Then we also improved the way we ask people to leave a tip. So we improved the wording, like the tone of voice that we use when we ask people, would you like to leave a tip, instead of just tip the driver. And I mean, this is an ongoing project, so we're still doing research on this, and we're still trying to improve before we launch. Finally, mobile web redesign. So this, as I mentioned, came already at a strategic point of view, so really early in the design process. The idea is because this is that we wanted to improve our conversion rate for people who use the mobile website. So they use the website to book our tickets, but on a mobile phone. So in order to do this, we conducted first research, and this was a combined effort with our user research team and our analytics team to just understand how these customers were using our website on their phones. And then we conducted a design sprint where we put together this cross-functional team with different people with different departments to work on this problem. Like, how can we improve our mobile web checkout? How can we increase the customer experience? And during this design sprint, the team already came up with